Magandang buhay mga bata! Tara, samahan ninyo akong matuto kasama si
Teacher Aika, your online teacher. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and hit the notification bell for more videos. Thank you! Matatag Curriculum, Mathematics, Grade 4, Quarter 4, Lesson 4. Our topic for today is about decimal numbers. This is Teacher Aika, your online teacher. Let's start! Learning competencies and objectives. Represent decimal numbers using models and manipulatives to show the relationship to fraction using A. Models, grid paper 100s. B. Manipulatives, base 10 blocks. And read and write decimal numbers with decimal parts to hundreds. Day 1 Short Review. Name the fraction that represents the shaded part of each illustration. First, the answer is 3/10. Second, the answer is 5/10. Third, the answer is 7/10. Fractions can be written in another form. Let us look at the following examples. 3/10 can be written as 0.3. 5/10 can be written as 0.5. 7/10 can be written as 0.7. Unlocking content area vocabulary. The word decimal comes from the Latin word decimus, meaning tenth. It is from the root word decem, meaning 10. Decimal is a fraction written in a special form where each digit represents a different power of 10. Decimal number is a number that has a decimal point followed by digits that show a value smaller than 1. Decimal numbers are commonly encountered in money, prices. Example, $5.75. Measurements, length, weight, height. Example, 2.5 centimeters, 1.75 kilograms. Time, hours and minutes in decimals. Example, 1.5 hours is equal to 1 hour and 30 minutes. Grades or scores. Test scores. Example, 89.5%. Temperature. Weather readings. Example, 36.7 degrees Celsius. Subtopic number 1. Represent decimal numbers using models and manipulatives. Activity 1. Coloring grid paper. Math storytelling. A. Using grid paper with 100 squares, decimals can be represented using a model such as the grid paper with 100 squares. In the Mathemata kingdom, there lived a beautiful princess named Snowy. One day, while walking through the forest to visit her friends, the seven dwarfs, she saw a garden where red apples grew abundantly. She noticed that the three of the trees had 100 red apples each. She decided to pick 15 red apples from the first tree, 44 apples from the second tree, and 8 apples from the third tree. Then she excitedly went to her friend's house bringing the red apples. She shared the apples to her friends. Snowy and the seven dwarfs made a promise to take good care of the forest that provides bountiful fruits to all living things. Questions. What fraction represents the red apples picked by Snowy from the first tree? The answer, 15 hundredths. How should this fraction be written in decimal form? The answer, 0.15. What fraction represents the remaining red apples from the first tree? The answer, 85 hundredths. How should this fraction be written in decimal form? The answer, 0.85. The whole grid paper with 100 squares represents the total number of apples hanging in the first tree. Since Snowy picked 15 apples, the fraction that represents them is 15 hundredths, which can be written in decimal form as 0.15 and is read as 15 hundredths, while the remaining apples from the tree can be represented by the fraction 85 hundredths, which can be written in decimal form as 0.85 and is read as 85 hundredths. What fraction represents the red apples picked by Snowy from the second tree? The answer, 44 hundredths. How should this fraction be written in decimal form? The answer, 0.44. What fraction represents the remaining red apples from the second tree? The answer, 56 hundredths. How will this fraction be written in decimal form? The answer, 0.56. Forty-four hundredths in decimal form is 0.44, which is read as 44 hundredths. And 56 hundredths in decimal form is 0.56, which is read as 56 hundredths. What fraction represents the red apple picked by Snowy from the third tree? The answer, 8 hundredths. How should this fraction be written in decimal form? The answer, 0.08. What fraction represents the remaining red apples from the third tree? The answer, 92 hundredths. How should this fraction be written in decimal form? The answer, 0.92. Eight hundredths in decimal form is 0.08, which is read as 8 hundredths. 92 hundredths in decimal form is 0.92, which is read as 92 hundredths. B. Using base 10 blocks. Base 10 blocks can be used in lessons on whole numbers and decimals. For whole numbers, cube represents thousands, flat represents hundreds, rod represents tenths, and unit represents ones. However, for decimals, cube represents tenths, flat represents ones, rod represents tenths, and unit represents hundreds. Cube, flat, rod, and unit. A decimal value can be represented using base 10 blocks: tens, ones, tenths, hundreds. Cube, 1000 block. This is the biggest block, made up of 1000 tiny cubes. It represents 1000. Flat, 100 block. This is a large square made up of 100 tiny cubes. It represents 100. Rod, 10 block. This is a long and thin block made up of 10 tiny cubes. It represents 10. Unit, 1 block. This is the smallest cube, representing just 1. In this lesson, the cube stands for tens, the flat stands for ones, the rod stands for tenths, and the unit stands for hundreds. But remember, when using base 10 blocks to learn about decimals, the flat, rod, and unit can change depending on what the cube represents. For example, if the cube stands for ones, then the flat will stand for tenths. The rod will stand for hundreds. The unit will stand for thousands. It all depends on how we decide to use the blocks. Questions. Number 1. How many rods will make one flat? The answer, 1 rod is 1/10 of a flat. Number 2, how many units will make 1 flat? The answer, 1 unit is 1/100 of a flat. So I will show you how numbers and decimals look using base 10 blocks, just like in our math storytelling. Fraction, 15/100. Decimal, 0.15. In words, 15/100. Fraction, 44/100. In decimal, 0.44. In words, 44/100. Fraction 8/100. Decimal, 0.08. In words, 8/100. Example number 1. Represent 0.15 using base 10 blocks. For the first example, to show 0.15 using base 10 blocks, we use 1 rod, that is 0.1 or 1/10. We use 5 small cubes, that is 0.05 or 5/100. When we put them together, 0.1 plus 0.05, that is equal to 0.15 or 15/100. Example number 2. Represents 0.44 using base 10 blocks. Example number 2. Represent 0.44 using base 10 blocks. Use 4 rods, that is 0.4 or 4/10. Use 4 small cubes, that is 0.04 or 4/100. Together, 0.4 plus 0.04 is equal to 0.44 or 44/100. Example number 3. Represent 0.08 using base 10 blocks. Example number 3. Represent 0.08 using base 10 blocks. Use 8 small cubes, that is 0.08 or 8/100. No rods are needed because there are no tenths. Activity number 1. Using the grid papers with 100 squares, illustrate the following decimals. Number 1, 0.25 or 25/100. Number 2, 0.62 or 62/100. Number 3, 0.05 or 5/100. Number 4, 1.30 or 1/30. Number 5, 1.09 or 1/900. For test B, name the decimals represented by the following base 10 blocks. First set, second set. Share your answers to your classmates. Day 2, worked example. Represent decimal numbers using models and manipulatives. Activity number 2, name the decimals represented by the following base 10 blocks. first column, we have pupil. Second column, score in fraction form. And score in decimal form is in third column. Chris, 78 hundredths and 0.78. Catherine, 95 hundredths and 0.95. Vince, 62 hundredths and 0.62. The learners will be tasked to represent the scores of grade 4 pupils using grade papers and base 10 blocks. Answer will be presented in the class. Here is the score of Chris using a grid with 100 squares, that is 0.78 or 78 hundredths. Using base 10 blocks, that is 0.7 or 7 tenths and 0.08 or 8 hundredths. Score of Catherine using a grid with 100 squares, that is 0.95 or 95 hundredths, and using base 10 blocks, that is 0.9 or 9 tenths and 0.05 or 5 hundredths. Score of Vince using a grid with 100 squares, that is 0.62 or 62 hundredths. Using base 10 blocks, 0.6 or 6 tenths and 0.02 or 2 hundredths. The learners will be asked to write the fractions and decimals that represent each illustrations. Here's numbers 1, 2, and 3. Activity 3 answers. Number 1, fraction 65 hundredths, decimal 0.65. Number 2, 30 hundredths, decimal 0.30. Number 3, fraction 1 and 42 hundredths, in decimal 1.42. Activity number 4, the learners will be asked to write the decimals represented by the base 10 blocks. First set, the answer is 0.25 or 25 hundredths. Second set, 1.44 or 1 and 44 hundredths. Day 3 lesson activity represents decimal numbers using models and manipulatives. A. Using the grid papers with 100 squares, illustrate the following decimals. Number 1, 0.25. Number 2, 0.62. Number 3, 0.05. Number 4, 1.30. And number 5, 1.09. And here's the answer. B. Name the decimals represented by the following base 10 blocks. The answer, 0.63 for the first set. Second set, 3.24. Subtopic number 2. Read and write decimal numbers with decimal parts to hundreds. Using base 10 blocks and place value math, the teacher will present how decimals numbers are read considering the place value. We use base 10 blocks to show the value of each digit. First is big cube, tens, flat, ones, rod, tens, and small cubes, hundreds. So the number is read like this: tens, ones, tens, hundreds. Example: 2.72. So that is 2.72. From left to right, the place value of 2 is ones, 7 is tens, and 2 is hundreds. Therefore, there are 2 ones, 7 tens, and 2 hundreds. How do we read the given decimal? 2.72 is read as 2 and 72 hundredths. What are the guides or rules in reading decimal numbers? First, read the whole number part. If the whole number is 0, then simply read the decimal part. Second, read the decimal point as end. Read the decimal part like a whole number and affix the place value of the rightmost digit. Day 4 worked example. Read and write decimal numbers with decimal parts to hundreds. Reading decimal numbers. Read the given decimal number and represent it using base 10 blocks. 2 as tens, 9 as ones, and 3 as tens, and 2 as hundreds. We read 29.32 as 29 and 32 hundreds. Again, we read 29.32 as 29 and 32 hundredths. To represent using base 10 blocks, so we have 2 tens, 9 ones, 3 tenths, and 2 hundredths. Again, 29 and 32 hundredths. Let's have the more examples. How to read the given decimals. 0.43 is read as 43 hundredths. 0.7 is read as 7 tenths. 5.82 is read as 5 and 82 hundredths. B. Writing decimal numbers. Write the following figures in words: 0.6, 0.65, 14.5, 0.05, 102.5. Now, let's answer. Number 1, 0.6, 6 tenths. 0.65, 65 hundredths. 14.5, 14 and 5 tenths. 0.05, 5 hundredths. 102.75, 102 and 75 hundredths. Lesson activity A. Complete the table. First column, we have number. Second column, decimal number. Third column, read as or word form. Let's answer. Number 1, 12.3, 12 and 3 tenths. Number 2, 514 minus 53, 514 and 53 hundredths. Number 3, 0.45, 45 hundredths. 16.97, 16 and 97 hundredths. 78.7, 78 and 7 tenths. 0.17, 17 hundredths. 15.4, 15 and 4 tenths. 324.09, 324 and 9 hundredths. 6.46, 6 and 46 hundredths. 9.16, 9 and 16 hundredths. Learners' takeaways. What I learned about decimals. First, how do we define decimals? Decimal numbers can be represented using models such as blank and manipulatives such as blank. Fractions can be written in blank form. How do we read decimals? Guides or procedures? Write your answers in your notebook. Reflection on learning. First, how can we connect this lesson to our everyday lives? Second, cite instances where knowledge of decimals is useful in practical contexts. Day 5, Formative Assessment. A. Name the fractions and decimals represented by the shaded parts of the grids. Write them in words. Use the table provided to organize your answers. First column, fraction form. Second column, decimal form. Third column, word form. Here are the grids for numbers 1 to 2. Grids for 3, 4, and 5. Let's answer. Fraction form 62 hundredths, decimal form 0.62, word form 62 hundredths. Number 2, 44 hundredths, 0.44, 44 hundredths. 2 and 73 hundredths. 2.73, 2 and 73 hundredths. Number 4, 30 hundredths. 0.30, 30 hundredths. Number 5, 1 and 9 hundredths. 1.09, 1 and 9 hundredths. B. Draw figures of base 10 blocks to represent the given decimal numbers. Then write the numbers in words. Number 1, 0.76. Number 2, 4.11. Number 3, 32.5. Number 4, 21.08. And number 5, 6.39. And here are the answers for numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Maraming salamat sa panonood. Huwag kalimutang i-like at mag-subscribe para sa higit pang educational content. I-click ang bell icon para ma-update ka sa ating mga bagong video. Salamat!